Yeah, I think we also have to have consistent events that people really want to go to, because no one's gonna want to fund an event that nobody goes to. So we're gonna have to like make sure that all of our like first few events are really good, so that we can get more funding and that we can talk to other dorms and see if they want to become involved too.
I think it's good to avoid the rush of events. A lot of times with hall government this year, we've planned events that would be a week or two in advance, and then something falls through as far as funding or what we need to get together for the event, and then it comes down to 3 days before the event, and we're still like rushing to get things planned. And I think if you plan things 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month in advance, I think it's easier if something falls through, you can go search somewhere else for funding or for resources that can help you with the event.
More specifically, there's actually a great fund available if you plan something on a Friday or Saturday between 10 and 2 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. There's like a bunch of money available if you could just plan it 3 weeks in advance. So we want to get ahead of the game, know what we're going to do, apply for that funding, because we know we can get it. It's not very well used, and there's a lot of it available. And then we don't have to ask, the ARs and have to worry about getting Father Bill to fund different events. Well, we can do that for the smaller events, but when we want to do the big events, we want to get that on top of that funding, make sure we've got events planned at least a month in advance, and that way we can have funding we know is going to come because it will be there, and it's already planned out, so we don't have to worry about trying to get funding a week before.
What's one commissioner spot you'd like to add or take away?
Brother, sister, dorm commissioner.
Other than that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Personally, being on like as a social commissioner right now, I'd like to not add or take away, but change the way we look at social commissioners. It seemed like, or at least it has been, that it's like the three of us plan events together, but I think that's a bad model. I think you should have more than one social commissioner. I think you should have 3 or 4, but I think that each of them needs to know that they're going to be doing things individually. There might be 1 or 2 events they do together, but at the end of the day, they need to be doing things individually. You need to know that you can count on each of them to throw their own event individually and have it be successful.
Mm-hmm. One thing I would want to add is I think we added freshman representatives this year, and I'd like to have one for every class, just because I think that goes a long way in terms of talking to freshmen and seeing how what they feel about different events and stuff like that. So I think that if we have a sophomore, junior, and senior one as well, that'll be helpful too. And especially when we do our larger events, they can talk to perhaps other people in their grade from different dorms, and pay, maybe the SCCs and the JCCs and stuff like that, so we can get more funding. And I think that'd be a great step forward.
I think going along with what Charlie has said with the social commissioners, I think that since it's such a broad, I think it's such a broad position that there's a lot that falls onto their plate, that if you separate it into maybe 3 or 4 different positions within the social aspect, so if it's with brother, sister dorm or another dorm, planning events with them versus planning events just in the dorm or with clubs or interacting with other things, I think that could be a good way to make that position more efficient, just getting each of them focused on one area of events, and then that way we have a lot more structure to how events come about.
All right. Any more audience questions? You got one? Doesn't have to be serious. Yeah?
Mr. Hassan, supposedly you taught Arnold how to lift. Do you have any plans regarding the weight room? Literally the walls are falling off.
And the weights are falling apart.
That's a good point. I know we've talked to Tommy about maybe getting a new air conditioning system in there based on what our hall funding is like at the end of the year. Additionally, we've talked about changing the weights, upgrading all the different barbells. We think it would be better spent on either more air conditioning or renovation of the room itself. As you can kind of see, we've gone room by room over these past few years based on our ND day. We did this room 2 years ago. We did that room this past year. So maybe this upcoming year, based on the funds we raise at ND Day and how well, which will fall on either of our tickets' plates. It's that presidential duty to have a successful ND Day. We hope to renovate another part of the dorm. Maybe that's the weight room. We can talk about it. But like I said, we've already been planning on funding something for that. So maybe we use that ND Day funding somewhere else, or include it in making a better weight room.
Do you guys have opinions on the weight room?
Or on ND Day money?
Yeah,
Ooh, ND Day.
I think that's a big thing is I know that when certain things come out, a lot of people are like, well, I wish we at least had a say of where that ND Day money goes. And I know some of that shouldn't just be left to the dorm as a whole, because that can be used inappropriately. But I think it is important, say for the air conditioning, I feel like there's probably a decent amount of people in the dorm who say, okay, we're there to sweat anyway, do we really need to get air conditioning?
Yeah,
How
they're a
about-
huge fan anyway.
And how about we get some decent equipment so that we can actually build up sweat? It's just, I think that going, into the sections and getting, more throughout the dorm and kind of figure out like what y'all want to do with the Indie Day money. Because, instead of just hearing that's what's happening, it's hard to get yourself excited to raise money for something you had no say in. So if you know that you're going to be able to have an input of where that money goes, it's a lot easier to get excited about raising it.
And I think in that vein, maybe a good compromise could be Hall Gov and Hall staff come up with a few different ideas that are feasible, that they know that we'll have the funds for, and then talk to the dorm, check the pulse there, see what any of those areas are getting the most enthusiasm.
And I think maybe we could have some of those ideas before ND Day actually starts, because that way we could have a goal to reach, something that people want to go out there for, something that people will be aware of all the events for. I think that'd be very important to get as much funding as we possibly can from that event.
If you had to change the Stanford mascot to any animal, what would it be? Or anything, actually. All of our animals.
We're keeping it the Griffin. We want tradition. We want to keep it steady. So.
Griffins? You don't want to change it?
No.
I'm not saying if you wanted to, if you had to change it. I love the Griffin.
It's very stately.
I like the studs.
Yeah, I like the studs too. I was about to say,
Studs.
that's where we used to be back
Like
in
a
like the
suite.
90s. We might be getting like some new outfit from Andrew Meisenbacher with the studs
Yep.
logo on it. I think if we had to change it, I think we go back to the basics, go back to the studs. Stanford studs sounds great. I know I've heard that there was a reason they changed it. I'm not sure exactly what that was, but at the end of the day, I think it'd be pretty cool to go back to what we used to be if we had to change from the Griffins. But I also agree with them in saying that if we're going to build a tradition, that now is not the time to change like a mascot. That's the last thing we want to do on Hall Gov. If like our job is to build tradition, we're not going to start a new one. We're going to build on what we have, what we've been doing, as well as make something great happen.
I've noticed that the Stanford football helmets have been quite bare. Have any of the candidates thought about maybe getting a football helmet decal or some kind of funding for that? Because white helmets are kind of boring.
I agree. I think it just comes with the more sports interest is coming, and I think, if we have people who want that, then we can go do that. I think the sports is something that has been doing well, and if we want that to continue to do well, having input and having that, and that's an easy fix. Like, being able to get stuff like that done and just hearing that is something that I feel that we all have a very broad range of people that we know and can talk to and to get things done. So if that needs to happen, then I'm confident that I could get that done. And I know if something in a different vein came up, that one of these guys could also do it. So just being able to take that and get something done, I feel like we're very solid.
Yeah, and those are all little things, but it makes it about building a culture of Stanford Hall that everybody can see and that everybody wants to be a part of.
Another comment I had is just that I think one of the important things is to not focus only on the freshmen, but when you say like, oh, everyone knows pirate dance is a great dance, well, maybe 35% of the sophomores like pirate dance, but what about the other ones? How can you get them interested in something? I think it's important to keep in mind the sophomore and junior classes too when you do things, because even though tradition starts with the freshmen, if it ends with the freshmen when they move on to sophomores, it's a bad thing. So just think about that too.
I think you bring up a good point too, and part of establishing that tradition is having every single class participating in it and setting an example for the ones that are coming up behind them.
Including those that have left the dorm that are living off campus that used to live in Stanford. Like some of them come back to play Griff Hoops on Tuesdays, or they'll come to events. I think we had one or two at the tailgate. But if we could get more of an outreach to them as well, I think they'd love to come back, and we just don't give them many opportunities to do so. For instance, I know I've talked with Father Bill about him potentially, he's been thinking about this for a long time now, of hosting like a bartending session, like for all those over the age of 21. He'd teach them how to make drinks, like different events like that. Something that maybe not aimed at freshmen, sophomores, or half the junior class, but something definitely aimed at those living off campus to get them back on campus, remember what it was like. Different things like of that nature, or get them like have an off-campus sort of mass. Maybe we go to them or something along those lines. Because I know that we do get a few. They come in late, but They still come to almost every mass, and it's just like they're not gone. They're not off campus in the fact that they're away from Notre Dame. They're still on campus. They're still Stanford Griffins. Just because they don't live here anymore doesn't mean that we should treat them as if they don't live here anymore.
And I think a lot of that comes from giving them something to continue to come back to. Because I know, like, Father Bill makes the point that, you know, he wants those seniors to stay. He wants seniors to stay, and I think a lot of tradition comes from that when you have guys who live here for 4 years. And it's like, that's when an impact can be made. But I think in order to do that, you have to have something that keeps them there on a regular basis. And one thing that I know that we've talked about, we really want to make a big, you know, push for is, I know that Stanford every Friday, guys go to the Center for the Homeless. And, you know, that's a huge cause, and I think we need to continue to devote into that. But having more things along those lines that get you back with those guys on a weekly basis is just keeps you coming back to Stanford. Just recently, I've started going to the Logan Rec Club on Fridays. And my roommate Grant, he's the president of that club on campus. And it's a group of special needs adults who are members, and they go bowling every Friday. And I've enjoyed it because it's something, every single Friday I'm going with some of my Stanford brothers and going and bowling with these and making a difference. And I think, like, having that weekly time when I'm with Stanford guys making an impact keeps me wanting to be in Stanford and around Stanford, because that's something that's keeping me regular with those Stanford guys. And I think that's important to have in order for guys to want to stay in Stanford and want to continue doing stuff with Stanford, is just having that connection weekly.
What television show will your administration most resemble?
House of Cards.
All right. Watch out, Charlie.
Ours is The Office.
The Office?
Yeah.
Anything else?
It's not wrong.
Yeah.
All right.
Relax.
Well, thank you guys for your time. A lot of good ideas. Thank you, audience members, for your presentation. Go Griffins. Straw. Good job. All right. Nice job, Shank.
Hey.